Hello guys, and welcome to another What I Eat in a Week. This week is slightly different to my usual What I Eat in a Week and days because due to the current lockdown situation, I was at home all week this week, so I actually put a little bit more effort into making my meals a bit more interesting, just because I think when you're stuck in one place all the time, it's nice to kind of treat yourself a little bit. So for Monday morning's breakfast, I started out with my favourite Alpro Greek style vanilla yogurt, which looks a bit gross when you put it out of the pot, but it tastes incredible. I topped it off with some blueberries, which I heated up in the microwave, and just some of my deliciously Ella granola. And I of course served that alongside a cup of tea because I pretty much start every single day with a cup of tea. It is the best way to start a day in my opinion, and that was a delicious breakfast. Then for lunch, I actually had a coffee, which is something I don't do all that often, but I recently bought a new milk frother, so I wanted to try that out and make myself a fancy coffee, and it was delicious. I then had some apple hot cross buns, which were accidentally vegan from Marks and Spencer's, because it's recently been Easter and I thought I'd make the most of them whilst they're still in the shops, just with some vegan butter and of course alongside my coffee as well. Then for dinner that day, I was making fajitas, so I just cooked up some borlotti beans, some peppers, and just like some sauce with spices, and then I made that up with hummus, romaine lettuce, a little bit of the bean mix, and then I topped it off with some vegan cheese, and then don't hate me, but I also put on some ketchup because I'm gross like that. And they were delicious. I love fajitas so much. I ended up eating 3. For Tuesday morning, I decided to have my pretty much most often eaten breakfast, which is porridge, which I just make with some oats, some chia seeds, and then oat milk, because you can never have too much oats, I guess. Cook that up on the stove, and then I had that with some peanut butter, some frozen blueberries, cinnamon, because cinnamon is amazing, and then I also had another cup of tea because it's me, let's be honest. Oh, and maple syrup, because I have to have maple syrup on porridge. It's just a must, cannot lie. At lunchtime, I decided to make some wraps with the leftover wraps from the fajitas the night before, so look at that avocado, it was absolutely perfect. I mean, oh my god. Had that with some hummus again, because I put hummus in pretty much everything. A little bit of the avocado, I ended up using half, and I had 2 wraps all together, so a quarter in each, some salsa, some vegan cheese, some spinach, and I think that was it. I just wrapped them up, made 2 all together, and then I toasted them in our like sandwich press, which just makes the best wraps ever. I think the cheese goes nice and melty, and they're just perfect. And it was such a nice day, so I ended up eating outside in the garden, and I also had a little bit of Easter chocolate because, like I said, it was just Easter and I still had plenty left to eat, so I had that with a cup of tea. For dinner, I ended up making like a lentil curry soup type thing. So I used red lentils, some curry spices that were pre-mixed, some paprika, some cinnamon, and also some garlic. I put in a little bit of oat milk just to make it nice and creamy, and then topped it off with water and just popped that on the stove to cook nice and slowly until the lentils were like super soft and just all cooked through. I then just added a little bit of kale in right at the end just to wilt that down. And honestly, this is one of my favourite dinners. It tastes so good, but it literally takes all of about 15 minutes to make altogether, especially with red lentils because they cook really quickly. And I served that with some sourdough toast, which I topped with hummus and Marmite, and yet another cup of tea because I was clearly on a tea hype that week. And then on Wednesday morning, I had yogurt, but this time I was trying out a new coconut yogurt, mainly because I didn't have any of my Alpro Greek yogurt left, but this one was really nice. It was super creamy, and I definitely can't eat as much coconut yogurt as I can with like soy yogurt because it's just a lot richer. But this one was really nice because it had some raspberry in there, and then I topped that off with some more of the deliciously Ella granola, which is so good, and I had another coffee because I was loving using that milk frother. That day I was also doing a little bit of baking. I was making some cookies because with everything being closed, some cafes have started releasing their recipes. One of those cafes is Pret, and they make the best vegan dark chocolate and almond cookies. I am literally obsessed with them, and I honestly could not express how excited I was when they released that recipe. So I decided to make them, and they were so good. I still don't think it quite beats being able to go into Pret and have one of their cookies because they just make them delicious, but being able to make them at home is definitely the the next best thing, and I love baking, and these were divine. They went down so well. I think I only ended up eating like 2 myself because everyone else in the house finished off the rest of them because they were so good. I will link Pret's recipe in the description below so you can check that out and make them yourself if you fancy. And then I was on a bit of a yogurt hype that day, so I ended up having a little bit more yogurt for lunch, again with some blueberries and granola. It was super delicious because I am a big fan of yogurt. And then one of the cookies and a cup of tea for a little afternoon snack. For dinner that day, I was just feeling a little bit simple, so I ended up just cooking up some pasta. And then I served that along with some spinach, some avocado, and just a tomato and basil sauce that I had a jar of in the fridge. And then I also just topped it off with a little bit of vegan cheese because why not? The next day I decided to have a smoothie bowl for breakfast. I was wanting a green smoothie, so I popped some spinach, kale, mango, pineapple and frozen banana in the blender and popped in a little bit too much water actually. This one ended up being a little bit more liquidy than I wanted, but I topped it off with some more granola, some peanut butter, and it was super tasty, but I was a little bit gutted because I put too much liquid in, which is like the biggest mistake you can ever make with making a smoothie bowl, but I tried to learn from that mistake. Then for lunch that day, I fancied making up some tofu scramble, so I popped about half a block of smoked tofu into a frying pan and just crumbled that up with a fork, and then I added in some mushrooms and kale. And then for my spices, I always use hummus. It's absolutely incredible. Nutritional yeast, turmeric, some paprika, and I also usually add in some salt and some garlic granules if I've got them. I then just add a splash of milk or oat milk, whichever plant milk you want to use, just to moisten it up a bit, and it's perfect. I served that with some sourdough toast, hummus and Marmite, another one of my cookies, and of course a cup of tea as well. Delicious. Then for dinner that night, I basically had the exact same thing as I had on Monday, except for I had it in tacos instead of wraps, but it was basically the exact same dinner. The next day, I decided to try again with a smoothie bowl, and I had frozen bananas, blueberries, raspberries, and a little bit of pineapple, along with some cinnamon, and definitely not too much water this time. And honestly, this smoothie bowl was incredible. I mean, look at that. It was so thick, just like a sorbet or an ice cream, and topped that with peanut butter, granola, and yet again, another cup of tea. Who's surprised? Not me. For lunch that day, I made some toasties, so I had one sweet one with peanut butter and jam and one savoury one with vegan cheese, Marmite and hummus, and they were so delicious. I absolutely love toasties. And for dinner that day, I was making pizza, so I had to make the dough a little bit earlier in the day, so I just obviously mixed up some flour, topped that with some yeast. I had like this garlic seasoning mix, which I popped in, which is delicious, and then I just mixed that with some water, and then just left it to rise for a couple of hours, just so that it had plenty of time to get nice and fluffy, as you do with dough. And once that was ready, I topped that off with plenty of sauce because I like my pizzas really, really saucy. And then I topped it with mushrooms, which is my favourite pizza topping. The leftovers of that smoked tofu that I had used for my tofu scramble the other day, just because I didn't want it to go to waste. I then topped it with some olives, which I know can be a controversial topping, but at the moment I am obsessed with olives. I feel like olives and Marmite, actually, which I've had a few times this week, are very like either you love them or you hate them, but I'm definitely on the side of love at the moment, and I've just been absolutely obsessed. And then I topped it off with some pre-grated vegan mozzarella and a little bit of spinach as well, and it was delicious. I think fresh homemade pizza, especially in like the spring and summertime, is just absolutely incredible. And on Sunday morning, I decided to treat myself to some pancakes, and I have literally the simplest pancake recipe ever. You just use equal parts of self-raising flour and then any plant milk of your choice. I used oat milk. You mix them together. You want it to be quite a thick batter, and then just use any oil. I used coconut oil in a pan. Pop it in there and just allow one side to cook until it gets a few bubbles on top. And then once that's happened, you just want to flip it over and you're absolutely fine. And I made 3 pancakes. I topped it off with some more of that coconut yogurt, some raspberries that I'd heated up, and also some maple syrup, because is it really pancakes if you don't have syrup? And clearly I wasn't the only one excited to have these pancakes that day. The dog wanted some as well, but luckily I managed to save them just for me. I also did some baking that day, so I made an apple crumble, just literally chopped up some apples nice and finely, put in some cinnamon, some sugar, and then my crumble topping was just flour, vegan butter, and sugar again. I also topped it with a little bit of sugar on top. There was plenty of sugar in this one. Baked for about 30 minutes and then served it up, and it was delicious. I felt like a very treaty day that Sunday, so I ended up just having crumble for lunch, and I also had some of my Alpro Greek style vanilla yogurt in replacement of either like cream or custard, so I didn't have any, but that worked absolutely perfectly and it was so delicious. And can you guess what I had it with? Yeah, that's right, a cup of tea with oat milk, of course. For dinner on Sunday, I made mashed potatoes, obviously just mashed up those potatoes as you would, and then I added in some salt and some oat milk, and then my secret to making the creamiest mashed potato is hummus. I use hummus instead of vegan butter for no reason other than I just think it adds a little bit more flavour to it, and it is just incredible, honestly the best. Served that with some red cabbage, some kale that I'd steamed up with some garlic, some Linda McCartney vegan sausages and some gravy, and that was the last thing I ended up eating that week. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing all of the things that I ended up eating this week in lockdown, and maybe that you found a little bit of inspiration to jazz up your own meals and just treat yourself whilst we're all stuck at home, and maybe have a little bit more time to get creative in the kitchen. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.